This week on Behind the Pulpit, we got earthquakes, we got solar eclipses, we got red heifers, we got Pastor Dave wearing a graphic t-shirt. What in the world is happening?
So this week we were talking about the end times. We had the earthquake, we have the solar eclipse. We were thinking about the world to come, the age to come. I wore my special eschatological t-shirt.
We talk about all that and more on today's podcast with the help of special guest Yvonne Lai, who serves on our Stephen ministry and our missions team here at Millington Baptist Church.
We got red heifers in Israel. We got anything you want to know. We got bridges collapsing. We got lightning strikes.
True. It's crazy.
The Statue of Liberty. It's a crazy time to be alive here in the first week of April.
So Yvonne, this is your first Behind the Pulpit. Welcome. We're glad you're here today.
Thank you.
And of course, we will gird up our loins and talk about Pastor Dave's thought-provoking sermon from Luke chapter 12. And spend a good amount of time talking about the end times.
You want to study theology, you want to be aware of what the Bible teaches about eschatology. It's good to study this stuff, but never at the expense of missing the practical application and the point of this stuff, which is that Christ is returning and he's given us a stewardship for which we're accountable. And let's always allow our study of eschatology to drive us toward being more faithful to him. If your study of eschatology drives you to be more argumentative, to be more prideful about your views, to look down on people, to constantly be stirring up controversy, then perhaps you're not studying it correctly.
Wherever you may be watching or listening to this today, we hope you're having a wonderful day. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's edition of Behind the Pulpit.
All right, hold on. Breaking news. Aftershock!
Oh my goodness, what is that?
We gotta get a wider shot. There we go.
Whoa, did you guys feel that?
Oh my goodness, there we go. We're switching up.
I'm all shook up. What in the world is going on here?
I know, it's crazy.
We
Pastor
just had
Dave,
4.8, 4.9.
Yeah, apparently. That could have been like a 4.5.
Whoa.
I don't know. Anyway, hey, welcome to Behind the Pulpit for it is April the 8th, 2024. And, of course, breaking news. We're going to start off with in the news this week because the big news from the weekend was there was an earthquake in New Jersey that people felt. And we have a guest on today to help us dissect that. Yvonne, welcome.
Thank
How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Good. Did you experience the earthquake on Friday?
Yes, I did.
All right. And what was it like for you? What was your first thought?
Well, I was with my coworkers at work, and we were in the pharmacy. And at first, I thought it was some kind of maybe construction going on nearby, next door. Yeah, and as it went on, when we felt the tremors, it made me think of maybe an explosion of some kind close by. And then after that,
it
when
was crazy.
all over, yeah, like I wondered if other people...
And then it was over. That was right. That was the experience. Pastor Dave, where were you?
Hold on. So you went from the progression, Yvonne,
Mm-hmm.
of this is some kind of explosion and then something else, but it never crossed your mind that this could actually be an earthquake.
Until I asked others.
You asked
elsewhere if they too felt it, and they did.
What
I'm
in
like,
the world?
oh.
Well, what happened? Where were you, Pat? You were telling me
I was downstairs in the man cave basement. I was at my desk working on some
the worst place
stuff.
to be during an earthquake, by the way.
Exactly. And there's 2 floors above me, and I'm
build
like,
basements in California.
I don't know where I should go, but I should not be here. So I just took a beeline upstairs. I went out my front door in my socks, and it was kind of over at that point. But I was kind of wondering, is there any damage to my house? So I did a little walk around to see if anything had crack in the foundation or anything, because that was like seriously shaking. My heart was going. It woke me up pretty good there. 10:23.
Okay.
I was already
Well,
awake,
I'll give you the reverse here because my wife is from California, so she knows about earthquakes. All right. So we were sitting in our dining room, and all of a sudden it was loud. It was loud, and she goes, "What was that?" And I stood up, and it did feel like there was something going on. And I looked back thinking there was a nuclear bomb that went off. And then I thought there's a helicopter above my house.
Bob's first thought was nuclear bomb.
That was my first thought.
Wow.
It was.
You can tell a lot about a person by what was your first thought.
Yeah.
When everything starts shaking.
Right. Now here's the crazy thing. So
Explosion.
I said my wife is from California, and she knows about earthquakes, but I don't know why she said
this.
This
No big deal to
get
her.
the kids down here. I know, but she says, let's get in the basement. It's like, no, you get in the basement during a tornado, not during an earthquake. We were corrected later on. So, but we did realize after that it was probably an earthquake. And then I said, let me go check social media. And she said, what? I said, we live in an era of social media. People are going to be posting about this, if this is what happened.
Sure enough, they were.
And
they were posting within minutes.
It was right over here in Lebanon, like 10 minutes down the road.
Epicenter.
We were basically at the epicenter.
I tell you, it was
crazy.
There you go, the Ramapo fault line.
Yeah, and I did the research, right? Ramapo. We are on a fault line here in New Jersey. It's just not very active, but there is a fault line.
It is. Which Friday I felt that one at 10:23 a.m. and then around 6 p.m. later that night I felt another one.
That's true. I was in the basement for that one, and thankfully my house is still standing. So
I didn't feel that one. The aftershock.
You didn't?
I was outdoors.
Oh, so
I see.
Aftershock.
I see.
Yeah.
So you were like Johnny. Johnny was driving, and he didn't. He let us know yesterday he didn't feel the earthquake because he was on the move.
I wasn't here.
Yeah, Tim, what was it like
Tim,
for you?
You missed it.
I walked down
here.
here.
You were in the podcast studio.
I was in the podcast studio.
So you were also in the basement.
Yeah, I was down here, and so I do a lot of work up in our balcony when it's windy, you can hear the steeple.
Yes, you can
move. So I guess my first thought when I was down here was, wow, it's really windy outside.
I did think that too. I did think wind had something to do with it.
And then I heard it rumbled, and the whole room was shaking. My computer screens were shaking. I was holding on to my desk.
This is not where I would want to be in an earthquake.
No, definitely not.
I didn't. My first thought wasn't a nuclear bomb, though, which is funny because it usually is. Whenever I hear like a low flying plane or a weird noise,
Noah said
I'm like,
it was
is this
his first thought too. I wasn't the only one.
Hey, you never know nowadays.
So my thought was, let me go upstairs, let me go out in the front yard. And I happen to be studying a passage about the end of the world and Christ returning in all of his glory. So my first thought was, let me look up in the eastern sky to see if there's a horse.
That was your first thought. Nice. You know what?
I don't know. It was on my mind.
Funny,
I was thinking about it.
A funny side story. So Dave and I were on a video call later that morning, and we were talking with this group of people, and then all of a sudden, Dave literally disappeared off your screen.
I did.
Like you were there, and then you were gone, and I was like, okay, well, I guess we're getting left behind. Dave's gone.
It's been an apocalyptic
We were
couple
wrong.
days here. We had a deluge of rain. I think that was Wednesday.
And then it looked like you came back out of the middle of nowhere. It was kind of
Dave's
weird.
disappearing, and then we've got torrential downpours. Today we have a solar eclipse. We
It's
got
crazy.
red heifers in Israel. We got anything you want to know. We got bridges collapsing. We got lightning
It's
strikes.
true. It's
in the
crazy.
Statue of Liberty. It's a crazy time to be alive here in the first week of April.
So Yvonne, this is your first Behind the Pulpit. Welcome. We're glad you're here today.
Thank you.
You came on a raucous episode. So
Yvonne, tell us a little bit about the ministries you're involved in here at Millington Baptist Church.
Well, I've participated in many different ministries here at Millington ever since I started coming here several years ago. The very first thing that I started doing after live streaming the sermons during the pandemic was a sermon series on Romans, which was really good. And during one of those services, someone talked about adult ed, Sunday school, being resumed on Zoom. And so
there was a resumption of adult ed.
Exactly,
Yes.
and it was a study on the book of Ecclesiastes with Jack Krause at the time. I didn't know anyone, went into it, and for several weeks I didn't really say anything or introduce myself. But it was very cool to just be able to study it and understand it with a Bible
true.
scholar and others.
I do
and
remember meeting you under
Shout
the
out to
tent
the
when we
adult
started
ed
doing the. We did like a
under-
welcome under the tent during COVID for like a lunch or
Right.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was cool to worship under the tent during that time, and it was when
And eventually it got very cool later in the summer. So the fall, so we decided to come back inside.
and some women's ministry activities,
Yes.
Bible studies. So it was also under the tent that I met Kim McLaughlin all those years ago, and she was doing a group, studying a book, and she invited me to join her her group that was happening on Thursday evenings at the time. So that's how I got to know some women here at church. And eventually, when everything was in person, it was just cool to see everyone in real life and all of that. And
So tell us about where you currently are serving.
Stephen Ministry is one of them. The missions team is another one, and that actually just happened. I feel like I kind of fell into it. It all started when I was volunteering. I was invited to volunteer at a food pantry, Feeding Hands, which is one of the organizations that we support here, have supported over the years. And I did it every week over several months. And during that time, I got to chat with Jim Romaine, who's very involved in the ministry. And he started talking to me about the missions team and invited me to have a chat with Larry Blakeman, then chair.
Yeah.
And then, and then I was invited to observe one of the monthly meetings on Zoom at the time. And then the next thing I knew, I was invited to be, a part of the missions team. And
Cool.
I really didn't know what to expect, but I ended up, but also there were some other people who told me about the work being done in Senegal, like Kathy and Paul
Sure.
showed me all
Sure.
these pictures from when they went on missions trips over there in the past, and I thought that they were really cool. I got to meet like all these missionaries who would come to visit, world partners. We here support over 30 or so world partners.
Wow. So 30 folks around the globe.
That's
we're
right.
serving. Yeah.
Yeah. So individuals, families, and organizations in very diverse ministries. Yeah, globally and also locally.
Very
as well.
cool.
Yeah.
So if you had a chance to do a recruiting pitch for serving on the missions team, what would you say? You got the cameras right here, and you would look them in the eye and say, "Join the missions team." Why should I do that?
Because you get to serve with Pastor Bob,
Okay.
which is cool, and just getting to know all the missionaries, world partners that we have partnered with. Like you were saying in your sermon yesterday, Pastor Dave, just being faithful stewards of everything that God has given us, including all our resources, our time, our gifts, and, being able to partner with all these missionaries in the work that they do through having an awareness, understanding their ministry, and learning how to support them and advocate for them through prayer, financially, and also sharing about their work to within the church and beyond. Yeah, to get more.
It's a
people
really cool
involved.
thing. I think we're unique in terms of the amount of people that we support. That's used to be more of a common thing, and we give about 20% of our budget outside our walls. So we doubly tithe outside to make sure that the gospel is going forward into this world. So thanks for your work on the missions team and
thank you.
your faithfulness and you serve pretty closely with a couple of the people that we support, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, advocating for them.
Yeah.
And
That's right. Yvonne is one of our advocates.
Who do you advocate for?
Yeah.
some.
Are you allowed to say?
You can say certain organizations that we support, like First Choice.
Okay, so you're the First Choice person.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so First Choice is in the news. You got
They
a lot,
need an
big-
advocate.
They do. They need a lot of advocates right now.
Yeah. Amy Huber has been, on this podcast as well to share about the legal battle, right, that they're
True.
going
Well,
through
she did
right
the
now,
Underground
so
podcast, but you can find that on the
Underground
YouTube channel right here if you subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Subscribe, like,
yes.
and subscribe.
Yeah, and there's been some developments since then, so we might have to have Amy back on to let us know what's going on.
Yeah, and there were always volunteering opportunities at First Choice, at Young Lives, and some of our newer world partners as well,
Yeah.
like Stephen and Gwen Anderson, who are going to be going to Ecuador later this year. We have Gracie Lung, another
Yeah.
new world partner with InterVarsity.
And she's down at Princeton, right?
Princeton and
Princeton?
TCNJ. She's
Oh, there
trying-
you go.
Yeah.
Your daughter. I just
Oh.
found
My
out
daughter
Dave's
just
daughter's going to
enrolled at
TCNJ,
Oh,
so maybe
really?
she'll meet
Wow.
Gracie.
What's her name?
Good.
Gracie?
Gracie.
I'll have to
Gracie Lung.
introduce her.
Yeah.
IVP.
Okay. Yeah.
InterVarsity.
We actually, Saturday, we were at the Accepted Students Day, and IVP had a booth, a subsidiary of IVP, the group of students that's ministering there at TCNJ. We were glad to meet them. I don't think I got a chance to meet Gracie, but whoever was representing TCNJ
cool.
was there. So I look forward
She's got
to
a
the
team of
connection.
folks. So you
Yeah.
probably met one of her peeps,
Right.
as the young ones
Yeah,
say.
they said there's like 150 students involved with the ministry there at TCNJ.
Yeah.
It's
So.
very, very
And
needed, very
growing
much needed.
staff.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Yvonne,
Yeah,
for
thank
your
you.
ministry on the missions team. There's another ministry that you're involved in that we wanted to highlight, and that is Stephen Ministry. So Stephen Ministry is our one-to-one lay caring ministry at Millington Baptist Church, and it's an opportunity to minister to people who are experiencing any kind of loss, whether that be the death of a loved one or a different kind of loss in life, a loss of a job, or perhaps even a broken marriage or another situation. So we want to be there and come alongside of people. We have an opportunity coming up soon in Stephen Ministry. Can you tell us about what's coming up?
Yes, so we would like to highlight the training, the new training class that will happen in April, end of April, I heard, with Drew and some other Stephen leaders, in the ministry. And so, yeah, for me personally, I think as a Christian, it's nice to be able to take after that empathetic, nature of Jesus and be more like him. And it's not easy or natural all the time, but, I think it's possible supernaturally to be enabled by the power of the Holy Spirit to be someone that people can turn to, can talk to during a time of need, even crisis.
Well, they say there's a big mental health crisis going on now, so I think Stephen Ministries are a really great inroad into even reaching people outside the walls of the church. So that's very cool.
Well, thank you for your ministry there. And so if you would be interested in serving in that way, the training is coming up real soon. So time is running out. You need to download the application and turn that into one of the Stephen leaders, myself, Carrie, Drew, Bruce, Michelle Clemmy. We'd love to talk with you and sign you up for the training. So
You
check
could
it out.
be one of the few, the proud, the Stephen Ministers, right? You can snatch
That's a
that,
t-shirt
that
idea.
title from the
Special Forces. That's
they
right.
are.
Yeah.
That is very, very true. Very cool. All right. Well, that's in the news, and we met Yvonne. So why don't we move on to our new, well-known segment called The Great Book War? And one of these days, I'm going to get a graphic that shows the books fighting each other. All right. So, Dave.
As long as
Wow.
you and I are at peace, the books can fight.
I don't think there's any peace today. Look at that
throws the
stack that
This
Pastor
is like
Dave has.
okay. So if you haven't joined
The
us,
camera was
Dave
not
always
supposed to pan over here.
complains about.
This was not supposed to.
He's always complaining about how many books I'm bringing, and look at this. Look at this.
That was
He's-
just. I had
he's-
to decide.
This is a book tsunami over there.
I
So
have
tell
one
us, what's your book?
This
What's
is
your
just
book?
my collection to decide from. So this week we were talking about the end times. We had the earthquake. We have the solar eclipse. We were thinking about the world to come, the age to come. I wore my special eschatological T-shirt.
All right,
So,
explain this. Zoom in and explain this T-shirt right here. This is
a
quite the
famous blackboard
math problem.
illustration that Gerhardus Voss used to
Gerhardus Voss.
draw for his students, and it
Dutch.
describes what's called the already not yet eschatological system. Whereas you think about the end times thinking, oh, this is in the future, this is what's to come. Actually, if you read the New Testament, and 1 Corinthians says that the end of the ages have come upon us.
Right.
We are now living in the end of
This
the
is the end
ages
times.
right now. So the Jewish people were looking forward to the end of their age, and Christ came to inaugurate the end of that age. And so they didn't realize that it would come in two parts. They thought it was just one age to come. But really what we've learned is that the kingdom is present now in a way that's already. You see these Bible verses that indicate the already part. But then later we see over here, see if I can get my shirt right here, there's some things that are not yet happening. So the parousia, the coming of Christ, the future kingdom in all of its fullness will come in the future. So this is my eschatology shirt. So in light of that, my book this week has to do with covenantal and dispensational theologies in conversation.
Okay, all right. What the heck does that have to do with the end times, Pastor
So
Dave?
this is two very different ways to understand the whole scope of Scripture and how to organize the Bible. So the Bible is consistent, but there are certain ways that you have to read it and structure it in a way that makes sense. So this is one of those great spectrum multi-view books where you have 4 different authors contribute 4 different perspectives. So I read this a couple months back, and it's got the covenantal view, which is more of a reform view. that is done by Michael Horton. He did a nice job representing that view. Then you have the progressive dispensational view, which is by Dr. Darrell Bach. He was one of my professors. He's visited Millington from time to time, and he does a great job explaining that. The other two views that you may or may not be as familiar with is there's a view called the progressive covenantal view, which is something that Stephen Wellum wrote about in this book. He's a professor of theology at Southern Seminary in Louisville, so he does a great job explaining. That's kind of a newer view, and it's almost like a bridge in between the covenantal theology and the dispensational theology, and it's progressive covenantal. So he does a really good job painting a compelling case for that view, I will say. And then there's the view that I was most familiar with called the classical dispensational view. That's by this guy Snowberger, who explains Snowberger, who explains that view. So if you're interested in kind of knowing some really nerdy theology about how to put all of the scripture together, including the end times, including what's the place of Israel today, and what role does the church play?
I was going to ask, so maybe could we mention a couple of the issues that people maybe just kind of assume that are debated here? So we have the nation of the church in Israel, right? Their relationship and the people of God, as well as the nature of the millennium, when that's happening. Is it future? Is it currently happening?
Right. So you got to put the pieces to the puzzle together. You got like the millennium piece, like when does that 1,000 years thing happen, and is it literal? Then you've got the church age piece, and how does that end? Does that end with a second coming, or does that end with the world getting better, or does that end with the rapture, the secret rapture? And is there two comings? Is there like a first coming with the rapture and then a ultimate second coming? And where does the tribulation fit in? There's 7 years. Is that 3.5 years?
Yeah.
And
or is the tribulation just kind of currently happening? Like we're in the tribulation.
Or are we in an extended tribulation? Are things going to get worse? Are things going to get better? And then when do the new heavens and new earth happen? You have to kind of take those puzzle pieces and put them together differently.
Right.
And so this is a book that will help you see the different ways to put the puzzle together, because there are different ways to put the puzzle together. One way to maybe describe this is there are a spectrum of views about either the continuity of Scripture versus the discontinuity of Scripture. So some people see this as more continuous, and that the church has basically just culminated and fulfilled all of God's plans for Israel, whereas some people would see the church as more of a parenthesis or an intercalation, and God's clock has stopped right now with Israel, and the stopwatch will start again as he continues to work with Israel later in the future. So some people see more continuity, some people see more discontinuity. This book teases all that stuff out, and I thought it was really helpful. It's a new book. It was just put out pretty recently, so let's see. The copyright is 2022, so it's worth reading. Check it out. Covenantal and Dispensational Theologies.
There you go. Well, speaking of the new heavens,
one book, just for the record.
That'll like whet your appetite if you want to go
in the stack
deeper.
For another
There's
time.
other views on other things. So Yvonne brought a book today that ties in very nicely with this. She's got why don't you share what this book is?
The book is Surprised by Hope by N.T. Wright, and
well-known book.
I just started reading it, so I don't know a whole lot, but it's thoughtful. It makes you kind of rethink some preconceived notions that people might have about after you die, that your soul kind of just floats into heaven, and that's where you're going to be, versus what actually happened to Jesus after he died and he resurrected into a new body, where he spent
the resurrection body,
time with his disciples for 40 days. He even ate and drank with them and taught them and ministered to them. And you mentioned that in your sermon last week, and at Easter as well, and how cool and amused you would, you found it.
Oh, that he was he was hungry. Where's my food? I'm hungry.
Just what that means for us. That great hope that we have.
We too
hope.
will experience resurrection. What N.T. Wright is really famous for is talking about how he kind of sees heaven as this holding tank. It's not the end game. The end game is the new heavens and the new earth. And he's got a really famous line in there to say it's not about life after death. It's about life after death that we're looking forward to in the new heavens and the new earth. And we have all these debates about how we're going to get there and what's going to happen. Is there going to be a literal millennium and different things? So anyway,
Good choice.
It's a good book.
It's always good to read a little N.T. Wright. So he's a deep thinker, and he's got a lot of good stuff to say.
He is.
Thanks for bringing that along.
There we go. Thus ends this week's edition of the Great Book War. Okay. All right, so Tim, I hear there's some questions that have come in that you are expecting us to answer. So why don't we put that one on the screen and see what we can do here?
We have a question. While I pull that up, I thought it was funny, Pastor Dave. I now subscribe to the pan-millennialism view, that it will all pan out in the end. I thought that was great.
That is a good view, a safe view to hold. So
here is the question. The question is, John 10 talks about Jesus laying his life down for people. How do we do that? What does that look like? Are we supposed to? Is this the same as denying yourself, picking up your cross, and following him?
What a great question, Pastor Dave.
I like it.
Yep. So it's a nice parallel here between, I think, John 10 and the Luke passage that does talk about taking up your cross and following after him. I think the heart behind that passage is really that we're engaging in a self-sacrificial way of serving other folks. Obviously, Jesus literally laid down his life. I don't know that means that we will literally lay down our lives. I suppose depending on our context and history, that may be the case. But
can I read the passage?
Go
All
ahead.
right, so
Give us
John
some
10,
context.
Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me."
Boom.
So here he's pointing out a contrast between those who care for God's sheep in a way that is self-sacrificial and compassionate and life-giving, and then he contrasts that with the leaders who are really there with ulterior motives and who are not there for the betterment of the sheep, but who are there just simply to fleece the sheep and are not willing to actually play a self-sacrificial role. So I think he's talking about perhaps the first century leaders of Israel, but also today we would think about false teachers and people who are just in the ministry but for the wrong reasons, for the wrong motives, perhaps for greed or for fame or for popularity, or that kind of leader who's not really caring about the person that they're ministering to. So there's a contrast there. I think Jesus gives us the ultimate model in himself of laying his life down, but then shows us how we can also be good leaders and be self-sacrificial leaders as well. So how do we do that? By putting others ahead of ourselves, by looking to others' interests first, not to our own interests, by carrying out the great commandment to love one another as Christ has loved us, by empathetically listening in ministries like Stephen Ministry and being there for people and caring for them.
Helping people come out of the pit. Isn't that a famous illustration of Stephen Ministry, the pit?
Yeah, yeah.
Am I remembering that correctly?
People get stuck in the pit, and they need our help to hold on to the tree of life root and pull them out of the pit.
There you go.
And not leave them stuck there. There's lots of different ways we can be self-sacrificial towards others.
All right.
Does that answer the question?
You feel satisfied with that, Tim?
Yes, I am satisfied with
All right.
that answer. Thank
Hopefully
you for
the person who asked the question is satisfied.
Yeah, always,
If
always,
not, let us know.
always feel free. We haven't had a lot of questions
Feel
recently.
free to express your dissatisfaction to Tim if you didn't like what we did right there.
You can ask questions on our website. I've had a few people ask questions on Spotify, and this question was asked to me via text message. So if you have my number, I guess you could text me your question.
Okay.
All right. Well, there you go. You heard it here, folks. Text Tim right now with your questions. All right, so that thus ends the question section of our episode today. Let's move on to our sermon portion, and Pastor Dave.
Every segment has a very final cut there from you. Thus ends. The question section.
Well, I'm just
ends.
making it clear that we're now doing these time stampings of the episode, so I'm letting you know this is done. We're moving on.
It's always very easy to find where the new segment starts because there's a pause and Bob goes, "All right."
Well, that's if I'm kind of doing the leading here. When is it harder when Dave does the driving of the episode?
No, it's
kind of
just
meanders
different.
in and out.
Dave will transition in different ways. Bob, you're always in. It's always an all right.
I do like the all right. I do like all right. Enough of that.
That's perfect.
Right.
That's great.
All right, enough of that. Let's move on. We had a time allotment. So, Dave, you had a really interesting sermon this week that involved red cows. It involved some parables and weddings and lots of eschatological stuff. So why don't you kind of, tell us what in the world were you talking about this week? Or how are you expositing what Jesus said? What was he talking about?
Yeah. Well, I came out of the gate with a little bit of a dispensational...
That's a way of describing it right there.
Craziness there. There's been some talk about the red heifers in Numbers chapter 19. There's a passage that talks about a perfect, pristine red heifer that's necessary to take part in a ritual cleansing of the temple. So those in Israel have... commissioned a certain rancher from Texas to get some red cows over there. So they shipped some cows to Israel. You may or may not know about this story. It caught my attention because that's the kind of person I am. I'm interested in those kind of headlines. And Passover's later this month, later in April. So there's thought about, is one of these cows going to be sacrificed for Passover? And what does that say about the future of the temple? And what are their plans? It was the 100th day of the Israel-Palestine conflict when one of the leaders of Hamas got up and said that they're not really pleased with the fact that these red heifers are over here in Israel. And what does Israel think that they're doing with these cows?
So amidst all the consternation over there, amidst all the U.S. saying we should stop, whatever, we're talking about cows. The real headline is the cows.
Well, see, there's a very sacred spot there where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is, where the Dome of the Rock is, and if Israel is messing around with that spot, thinking we're going to be putting a temple up here, well, those that are not in favor of that particular structure are going to be speaking out. So that was the headline, and it just told the story. And it just got me thinking in general about what does the future hold? And here's the basic principle.
Great question.
Like, what we believe about the future impacts what we do today. And really, that's what Luke chapter 12 was all about. For the first time ever, I believe, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus reveals the fact that he is going to return triumphantly in all of his glory. And when he does, there's this accounting. And some people are going to be rewarded, other people are going to be punished, but everybody will be held accountable at that day. Then he gives these parables to describe what it's going to be like. Like it's like I'm away at a wedding feast and I'm coming back, and you need to be ready whenever I come back.
Right,
or it's like a thief that breaks in, and you have to prepare yourself so that you're not surprised by this. And then he says it's like an owner entrusting their estate to managers, and you have to do business for the owner while the owner's away, and you'll be rewarded or punished accordingly based on the stewardship that you've been given. So that was the passage. It's a good reminder for all of us that we will be held accountable and we are responsible, and what we know about the future, revealed to us by the one who knows the future, should impact the way that we live today. In fact, every single time the New Testament teaches the second coming of Christ, it's always accompanied by that call to godly living, responsibility, stewardship, faithfulness. What has God given you, and are you being faithful with what God has given you? That's the challenge.
Do you think is it a fair statement to say that sometimes people can get caught up in all the details and the timing, that we're so focused on that we miss a little bit of the main point of this whole godly living piece that you were drawing out? And you really made that a big preaching point at the end. Is that fair to say or not?
I think we can. And I think it's a challenge in the sense that you want to study theology, you want to be aware of what the Bible teaches about eschatology. I got my T-shirt on today. It's good to study this stuff, but never at the expense of missing the practical application and the point of this stuff, which is that Christ is returning. and he's given us a stewardship for which we're accountable. And let's always allow our study of eschatology to drive us toward being more faithful to him. If your study of eschatology drives you to be more argumentative, to be more prideful about your views, to look down on people, to constantly be stirring up controversy, then perhaps you're not studying it correctly. Because I don't think that's why those passages are in the New Testament, so that we could, the Bible says knowledge puffs up. So when we get knowledge about something, we can puff up with it, and it's not very attractive. It's not very becoming of us for various reasons. But that's not why those texts are written. They're written not so that we can become a smarter sinner. They're written so that we could become more like the Savior. So that's let's not miss the main thing. Let's keep the main thing the main thing.
Sure. So Yvonne, did you get to hear yesterday, or was it yesterday? And did you have any questions for Dave, or thoughts for Dave, or rebukes for Dave from the message?
Just that I felt it was a very powerful message, a very good reminder, and also warning. At times, reading those passages, those parables in the Bible might come off as really harsh or make you really scared. But I think it would be harsh and cruel if we were not given those warnings, just knowing the end result and the consequences of not being a faithful steward of everything that we've been given, to be ignorant, like the ramifications are just way more severe in that case. So very grateful for reminders, gentle reminders in the Bible from God and his word.
Yeah. There's a lot of substance there that certainly got us thinking. Maybe not the most popular sayings of Jesus that are out there, but necessary and important. And I think that was one of those sermons, where the Scripture just kind of speaks very clearly and loudly and for itself. It doesn't need a whole lot from the minister. It's just, hey, let me package together these words of Jesus so you can think about those words, because they're sobering.
Yeah, for sure. So there was now I know you like to delve into stuff, and there was probably a lot you couldn't include in the message. One of the things that was kind of in there that we didn't get to talk about in depth was the whole idea of rewards and punishment, and there was a theme of judgment. I mean, there was some pretty harsh language in there about somebody gets a severe beating versus less beating, and I guess I have a twofold question here. Number one is, what's your thoughts on that reward and punishment section? And if you want to save that for a later time, that's okay too. And then secondly, I did think this theme of judgment is true, but also is so countercultural in today's world that it comes across as like in your face. So how do we share that with a culture that is so adverse to this judgment theme?
Yeah. Well,
how was that question?
That's fine. We can go either direction there. So, there was a really interesting clause in one of the books that you've recommended before about how judging is the ultimate sin. And so, in our day and age, like, to judge is just like, why would anybody judge? But yet the Scripture is clear that this generation seems to be caught up with justice, but very uncomfortable with the idea that God is actually a God of justice, which seems incongruous, but I think we need to read the Scriptures clearly and plainly that indicate that we're on this trajectory towards the justice of God one day, who will settle the score, who will make all things right. And if you've ever been really wronged and that was never made right, justice from God is something that you can rest in and find peace because of. And so I think it's important to uphold the justice of God, because there really are wrongs in this life that have been committed. So that Natasha Cranfield book is the one that I was referring to that has that clause.
Oh, the faithful minority, I believe. Yeah. She's got like a threefold thing, but ultimately there is the last
judging is the ultimate
judging is
sin.
the ultimate sin. Feelings are like your ultimate guide, and there was something. God is your ultimate guess. Like, we're not sure that God exists. My feelings and my emotions are going to drive me to make decisions, but don't judge me. That's like the worst thing you could possibly do.
Right.
That was kind of the threefold summary of the post-narrative, post-Christian world, post-modern world that we live in.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's important to just uphold the fact that the Scripture teaches that we're on this trajectory towards the judgment of God. Number two, this is one of those passages people talk about and point to when they think about different levels of eternal punishment. Because he says, that knowledge has been given in not equal ways. Can't remember the right word to use there. So, in
not equally distributed.
Not equally distributed. Some people have more knowledge than others, and based on that knowledge, you'll receive an accountability for the knowledge that you have been given. And so he says, there's different levels of punishment based on the different information that these people have. So this is one of those passages that talk about like levels of eternal consequences. So, you read about that kind of stuff, and you wonder, is there any scriptural backing for that? This is one of those passages that seems to indicate there's different levels.
Yeah.
In the same way, some people read passages about rewards, and they see different levels of reward given after we pass along, life after death, and are those rewards tangible? Are they the different crowns that the New Testament talks about? Is the presence of Christ and our experience of Christ the ultimate reward, and that's all we need? Or is there different levels of accountability and responsibility given in the future? There's some different views on that. That's going to take longer than this podcast answer. But we are thinking about doing a study on this kind of thing in the near future. So we're looking forward to diving a little deeper into that topic.
Sure. All right.
So that's my short answer to those questions.
That's a good short answer. We'll come back to that because it's probably worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
So what else would you say? What's your parting shot for us? Is there anything else that you didn't get to say in that message that you'd like to say now?
Yeah.
And before you go and have a hamburger for lunch, a red hamburger,
a red heifer burger.
burger.
Yeah, I would just say, don't get lost in the details. Keep the main thing the main thing. Be faithful to God with what He's entrusted to you. So that's the application. That's the challenge, and I'll leave it with you again. What has God given you? What are those talents? What is that treasure? What is those gifts? What family members has God given you? What is your spouse? What is your children? What are your friends? What are your coworker opportunities? What has God given you, and are you being faithful to serve God with what He has given you? That's the challenge I think we should all take to heart, not only for this sermon, but for all of the days to come. So
yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Next week we'll be continuing on the end of Luke 12 into Luke 13. We're making our way through the.
We're setting fire to the earth this week.
That's right. We're on the road.
I came to set fire to the earth.
It's
just when you thought that the apocalyptic imagery was going to maybe take a break. No.
Their hearts were burning at the end, but the fire came before. So be prepared for that. We're going to be coming to the end of the road, so to speak, in about 2 weeks, and then we're going to be talking about stories with Jesus, which will be our next section. And there's going to be that'll be very parable. I know you got into the parables yesterday, but kind of May is going to be our main parable month, and then we'll talk about the last week in June, and then we'll be almost done with Luke. We got to decide what we're doing for the rest of the summer, Pastor Dave.
I'm looking forward to getting parabolic for now.
Parabolic.
We're almost at the end of season 2 of Behind the Pulpit.
Oh, my goodness.
All right. Hey, Tim, wow. When's season 3 beginning?
I think we said we end season 2 after the Luke series, so we can start season 3 in the summer.
Well, then we got to have a good follow-up to Luke.
We'll figure it out. But for now, we're really enjoying our study in the Gospel of Luke. It's a lot
been a great
here.
study.
It's a lot to study.
It's robust, as they say.
It's an orderly account.
It's true. All right, so Tim, I think we've come to the Theology Sprint.
The Theology Sprint.
Yvonne,
and then we're
like
actually going to end with the announcements today. We got a couple of things to say, but let's sprint, and then as we're panting, we'll let you know what's coming up in the life of the church and say goodbye.
All right, so today's Theology Sprint is: do you think advancements in technology such as artificial intelligence and genetic engineering could potentially alter the fulfillment of biblical prophecies or traditional understanding of end times?
I'm glad we have a pharmacist as a special guest.
Tell
on
us
our
about the
podcast
genetics.
today.
There we go.
So we're talking about advanced technologies here and how it relates to the
how
end
is
of the
AI
world.
revolutionizing the pharmaceutical industry?
Do you see any intersection between AI and the work that you do?
Probably drug information related things in the future. I mean, medications are already being filled by machines and robots and all of that, but for the most part, like counseling and all of that is still being done by live, pharmacists, other than people going online to look for information, which there's a lot of course. Yeah, but pharmacists, I mean, and all medical professionals actually use a lot of these resources too. So as far as AI, maybe drug info related things, kind of like how people ask ChatGPT or Google like legal questions. I mean, I could see people resorting to AI for medical questions as well.
Sure. Well, I think
I'm glad Yvonne was here today.
the question though is really about, are those things going to alter God's plans? I think that's the question. And I would say, that's getting at the question of whether God holds the future and how He orders the future, and whether this is surprising God, which I don't think is true. I mean, God is not surprised. He knew these things were going to happen, and they would be ultimately folded into what's to come in the future. I tend to think. I don't know if you would disagree with that, or but I think that's the heart of the question there.
Okay. Could you repeat the question again? Because I maybe didn't catch that part.
Absolutely. The question is, could advancements in such fields as artificial intelligence and genetic engineering potentially alter the fulfillment of biblical prophecies or the traditional understanding of the end times?
Well, they could alter our interpretation of them. So we may be seeing things today that perhaps back 2,000 years ago they couldn't even imagine. So we might be seeing, maybe this could involve the latest technologies, and maybe this is how things will culminate towards the end of time. So our interpretations might change, but the decree of God has already gone out. He knows the end from the beginning, and His plan will not be thwarted. So I would agree with Pastor Bob in terms of sovereignty and His providence working itself out.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the question that's being asked. Although I will say, so John Lennox, kind of a famous apologist in England, wrote a book a few years ago called 2084, and he dealt with some of the artificial intelligence stuff. And he made a pretty compelling case. I don't remember if it was in the book or if it was in a video that I saw, that he felt the Antichrist was going to be an AI system. So we'll see whether that pans out in the end, but that was at least his case. So
you could see how something like the latest technology would be involved in sort of a one world expansive informational system and a some sort of database that involves so much information that
or some of the social crediting stuff that's going on in China and that they're exporting out to other countries. That could prevent you from buying and selling and things of that nature.
Right. So if your ChatGPT starts talking about 666 and stuff like that, just be careful about what you put.
That is, of course, if you hold to a futurist view of the Book of Revelation. So yeah. There you go.
You know what I recently heard? This is sort of off topic, but our oldest copies of the Book of Revelation, the textual evidence that we have from the earliest manuscripts, don't use the number 666. I think there's two. The two oldest ones that we have use 616. The number of the beast is different in the oldest copies of the Book of Revelation. Which
so
I found
what would be the implications of that?
I think it's the difference between Nero being spelled numerically in one language versus the other, 616 versus 6.
Right, because people would say that that's the number that Nero was the one who was the great persecutor in the first century, so it's attributed to him.
For a first century fulfillment, they would point to Nero, but then some people would see that as like a
precursor.
Yeah, precursor to the ultimate Antichrist, which is one day to come. One of my professors, so I had Dan Wallace at Dallas Seminary, and he's like a textual critic expert guy, and he was making a joke about this 666 thing. He's like, well, here's what 616 is. So 666 is the number of the beast, And 616 is the neighbor of the beast. So it's just, right down the road.
There you go.
There's my joke for today, Tim. How do you like
Very
it?
true.
Yeah.
Great joke.
There you go.
Made me
All right.
chuckle.
So,
LOL.
how about we end with some
ROFL?
announcements, and then we'll be out for today. So, what was on the docket? We were talking about rummage sale. We already mentioned Stephen Ministry. We're entering into a lull, as they say, in our calendar. We had a busy March, and now things are going to be. We're going to take a breather.
But we do have something very exciting coming up.
And it is the senior lunch.
Yes.
Friday,
yes.
April 19th. Make sure you mark your calendars. We're looking forward to a good lunch together.
They
Bring a dish to share.
They know how to eat, Pastor Dave. Have you been over there? They see
I
a pastor,
go.
they're
I'm
like,
a little
here,
young.
here's some food. Eat it.
Yeah. So join us for senior lunch a week from Friday. What else is coming up, Tim?
This will be our last one because we already highlighted the Stephen Ministry. So this will be the last
The
thing
rummage
that we go over.
sale. We learned that it was a...
Rummaging is occurring, and we're looking forward to a great fundraiser for our upcoming missions trip in the Dominican Republic. We got almost 40 teens that are serving this summer, and if you'd like to bring your wonderful rummage to NBC, we would be happy to take that as a donation, and we're fundraising for the upcoming missions trip. And we'll take the donations like you see on the screen. Clothing, could be furniture, could be your baseball card collection that you're not sure that you want to keep. Whatever you want to donate, whatever you feel pleased to.
Well, we did give some guidance last week. We
Remember,
said,
this world is passing away, so
Right.
store up your treasure where moth and rust do not destroy.
This is true. But remember, we said last week, look at whatever you're going to bring, look at it and ask, would I want this? And your answer is no. Just throw it away.
Yeah, yeah.
We want people to take these things, and we want it to be a successful fundraiser. So
Yeah, so
There you
bring
go.
your best stuff. We're looking forward to a great rummage sale.
there you go. All right, Yvonne, I'm going to give you the last word on Behind the Pulpit today. Thanks for being here. What would you say to the audience before we close out?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, well, it was a
this
pleasure.
is a really cool studio in here.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tim and Noah
Tim
and
and
John,
Noah.
they've all done a great job of organizing it in such a way that it feels
Still under
professional.
construction. We're always improving here in the Unhindered Studios.
It's true. I love staring at the flag of Rohan in the background, and it gets me fired up each week. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us for this week on Behind the Pulpit. We hope you join us next week. We're here, same bat time, same bat channel each and every week. Now it's time for a nap. Time for an afternoon nap. What do you think? Let's go do
I
it.
don't have time for that, but have
All
a
right.
great rest of your day,
We'll
guys.
see you later.
Enjoy your red heifer cheeseburgers.